At 42, the woman who will one day be the Queen of England has mastered the art of the silent shield. To the world, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, is a portrait of unshakable poise, a marble statue of modern royalty that never cracks, never stumbles, and certainly never loses her temper. She is the ultimate commoner-turned-icon, a woman who has navigated the shark-infested waters of the British press for 2 decades without providing them a single drop of blood. But royalty is a performance, and motherhood is the raw, unedited truth. Behind the closed doors of Kensington Palace and the private gates of elite schools, the title of Your Royal Highness offers no protection against the stinging reality of a parent's nightmare seeing your child shamed in public. The paradox of Catherine's life is that she is the most photographed woman on the planet, yet she remains a mystery. She spends her days advocating for early years development, speaking to experts about the psychological foundations of childhood, and yet she found herself powerless in a Year 3 classroom on a cold Thursday in March. This is the story of the day. The mask of perfection met the raw friction of a teacher's breaking point. It was a morning that began with the mundane precision of a royal schedule and ended with a viral moment that forced the palace to confront the limits of their influence. It was not a political crisis or a constitutional dilemma. It was a battle over a tucked-in shirt and the dignity of a 7-year-old girl named Charlotte. The morning of the incident began at 6 a.m. The palace was a cavern of silence, the grey London light just beginning to bleed through the heavy curtains. Catherine did not wait for staff to bring her tea. She walked to the kitchen herself, moving through the routine that keeps her grounded. By 7:15 a.m., the domestic machinery was in full swing. She checked Prince George's history project, ensured Prince Louis's jumper was free of breakfast stains, and meticulously tied a blue ribbon into Princess Charlotte's hair. They were dressed in the rigid navy uniforms of Thomas's Battersea, a school that demands excellence from its students regardless of their bloodline. Prince William stood by the doorway, a spectator to the controlled chaos, sipping his tea as the children scrambled for their lunchboxes. At 7:30 a.m., the car moved out, the security detail trailing like a shadow. Inside the car, the atmosphere was thick with the quiet anxiety of a school day. Charlotte was reciting her spelling words, her voice small and focused. She asked her mother if her teacher, Miss Hall, would like her reading that day. Catherine smiled, a practiced, reassuring gesture that hid her own fatigue. She told her daughter that practice always leads to confidence. They arrived at the school gates just before 8 a.m. The air was biting, but the sun was bright. Catherine stepped out, grabbed Charlotte's bag and took her hand. She moved through the crowd of other parents with a polite nod, a future queen trying to be just another mother in a beige coat. But the sanctuary of the school was about to be breached by a confrontation that no royal protocol could have prevented. In the Year 3 classroom, the smell of floor wax and pencil shavings hung heavy in the air. Miss Hall, a woman in her late 30s with shoulder-length brown hair and black-rimmed glasses, was arranging flashcards at the front of the room. She did not look up when the Princess of Wales entered. When she finally turned, the smile she offered was not warm. It was a thin, forced line. Catherine offered a polite greeting, but the atmosphere shifted instantly. Miss Hall's gaze dropped to Charlotte, and her face soured. She sighed audibly, a sound of profound disappointment that silenced the other children entering the room. "Charlotte, your shirt isn't tucked in properly today," the teacher said, her voice carrying a sharp public edge. "I hope you're not becoming lazy." The room went still. Catherine felt the flush rising in her neck, but her fingers remained steady. She bent down to adjust Charlotte's uniform, whispering a word of encouragement to her daughter so the girl wouldn't feel the weight of the shame. But Miss Hall was not finished. She turned her gaze to the princess, her tone dripping with a condescension that bordered on the theatrical. "Perhaps you could ensure her uniform is correct before leaving home," she added, loud enough for the other parents in the hallway to hear. Some parents are too busy thinking about their public image and forget the basics like teaching their children how to dress properly. It was a direct hit, a calculated insult aimed at the very heart of Catherine's public role. Catherine stood up straight, her heart hammering against her ribs. In that moment, she was not a royal. She was a mother whose child had been used as a pawn in a teacher's personal frustration. The silence in the hallway was suffocating. Other parents pretended to look at their phones, their discomfort palpable. Catherine could have ended the woman's career with a single phone call. She could have channeled the fire of the Windsors and demanded an immediate apology. Instead, she chose the path of the long game. She looked Miss Hall directly in the eye, her expression a mask of frozen politeness. "Thank you for your feedback," she said quietly, her tone firm enough to draw a line in the sand. "I'll keep that in mind." She did not wait for a response. She kissed Charlotte's forehead, whispered for her to have a good day, and walked out of the building with her head held high. But once she reached the car, the composure began to fray. She sat in the driver's seat, eyes closed, taking a deep breath to stabilize the anger that threatened to boil over. She was the patron of mental health charities. She knew that shame was a poison for a child's development. She was the architect of the Big Five survey on early childhood. And here she was watching her own daughter be belittled by the very institution meant to nurture her. She called her secretary not to complain but to confirm her schedule. The work did not stop for personal insults. Back at the palace, the incident lingered like a dark cloud. Prince William called from Windsor, his voice dropping an octave when he heard what had happened. His reaction was visceral, the protective instinct of a father who had spent his life being hounded by the world. He offered to call the headmaster immediately, his tone suggesting that Miss Hall's tenure at Thomas's Battersea was nearing its end. But Catherine stopped him. "No," she said, her voice steady and absolute. "I'll handle it myself." She understood that a princess demanding a teacher's head would only feed the public image narrative Miss Hall had weaponized. She needed a solution that was surgical, not emotional. She needed to lead with grace, even if the world wanted drama. Throughout the morning, Catherine sat through meetings about children's mental health and community visits, her mind constantly drifting back to Charlotte. A text from a teaching assistant, Mrs. Peters, arrived at noon, noting that Charlotte was doing fine and had read confidently in class. The relief was a physical weight lifting off Catherine's chest. Her daughter was resilient, but that didn't excuse the teacher's behavior. Catherine realized that teachers hold the power to build or break a child's confidence in a single sentence. If Miss Hall was doing this to the Princess of Wales's daughter, what was she saying to the children whose parents didn't have the power to push back? The issue was no longer personal, it was systemic. At 3 p.m., Catherine decided to break her usual routine. Instead of sending the security team for the afternoon pickup, she drove to the school herself. She wanted her daughter to see her face at the gate. As she stood among the other parents, she felt the whispers. The incident from the morning had clearly traveled through the parent WhatsApp groups. When Charlotte appeared clutching her reading folder, her face brightened for a moment before the hesitation returned. She told her mothers that Miss Hall said she hadn't read clearly enough. Catherine knelt in the dirt, ignoring the beige coat, and embraced her daughter. "You did your best, darling," she said. "Some days are just harder than others, and that's okay." In the car, Catherine took the time to address the elephant in the room. She told Charlotte that she had done nothing wrong, and that sometimes adults say things they shouldn't. "Did I embarrass you, Mommy?" Charlotte asked, her voice small. Catherine's answer was firm. "Never. You could never embarrass me." It was the most important lesson she could teach her daughter, that her worth was not tied to a teacher's mood or an untucked shirt. Once they reached home, the children ran to the gardens to play football with William. The palace air finally filled with the sound of laughter. But Catherine's work for the day was not finished. She returned to her study and picked up the phone to call the headmaster, Mr. Jonathan. She spoke with a clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. She did not raise her voice, but she described the morning's events with a clinical precision. She explained that while she respected the school's standards for uniforms, the public humiliation of a child was a violation of the trust between a teacher and a family. She made it clear that she wasn't calling as a royal, but as a parent who expected professional conduct. Mr. Jonathan was horrified. He apologized profusely, promising to handle the matter during the next staff meeting. Catherine thanked him and hung up, feeling a sense of relief. She had stood up for her daughter without creating a tabloid scandal. She had used the system, not her title, to seek justice. However, the peace was short-lived. The next morning, as she dropped the children off again, Miss Hall avoided her gaze, pretending to be busy with paperwork. It was a cold, silent acknowledgement of the friction. But later that afternoon, during the pickup, the cycle of disrespect repeated. Miss Hall stopped Catherine at the gate, her tone icy and loud enough for others to hear once again. "You might want to work more on Charlotte's class attitude. She seems distracted." Catherine stopped in her tracks. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't a silence of shock. It was the silence before a storm. Catherine realized that Miss Hall wasn't just having a bad day. She was acting out a deeper, more troubling resentment. Calm but firm, Catherine responded in a way that silenced the playground. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dropping to a level that commanded absolute attention. "You do not talk to children that way. If you are going through something personally, speak to a professional. Do not take it out on my daughter." Miss Hall froze her face, turning a pale shade of grey. She had spent years believing that the royals would never bite back, that their need for a perfect image made them easy targets for her own frustrations. She was wrong. A nearby parent stepped forward, echoing Catherine's sentiment and demanding an apology. Miss Hall did not apologize. She turned and fled into the building, her mask of authority completely dissolved. The headmaster summoned Miss Hall to his office immediately. The truth finally emerged. She was struggling with severe pressure at home, a personal crisis that had bled into her professional life. She admitted that she hadn't meant to let it affect her work, but the damage was already done. Mr. Jonathan, sensing the fragility of the situation, suggested she take several days off to rest and seek support. When he called Catherine to explain the situation, the princess's reaction was the most surprising part of the entire saga. She didn't ask for the teacher's resignation. Instead, she asked, "Is she fine? Does she need help?" It was the ultimate punchline test of her character. She chose empathy over retribution. Catherine did not just offer words of concern, she acted. She reached into her bag and provided the headmaster with her direct contact information for Miss Hall. She connected the teacher with one of the mental health organizations. She and William support an initiative focused on emotional well-being and stress management. For Catherine, the incident was no longer about an untucked shirt. It was about the root wound of the teacher. She understood that happy, healthy adults do not humiliate children. By helping Miss Hall heal, she was ensuring that Charlotte and every other child in that classroom would be safe in the future. It was a strategic, compassionate move that transformed a conflict into a legacy of care. A week later, the atmosphere at the school had transformed. Miss Hall returned to work, her posture softer, her voice sincere. She knelt to face Charlotte and apologized in front of the class for her previous comments. She then turned to Catherine and offered a genuine apology for her behavior. Catherine accepted it with a gentle nod, acknowledging the bravery it takes to admit a mistake. She didn't stop there. She continued to check in on the teacher's progress through the charity network. It was a lesson in leadership that the palace staff would whisper about for months. The princess had not only protected her child, she had rehabilitated her adversary. The final act of the story occurred on a Monday morning. Charlotte, now back to her cheerful, humming self, packed 6 chocolate muffins into a pink box tied with a silver ribbon. She had written a thank you note to Miss Hall for helping her with her reading. Catherine watched as her daughter handed the box to the teacher at the classroom door. Miss Hall clutched the box to her chest, her eyes filling with tears as she watched the little girl walk to her desk. She looked at Catherine and whispered that Charlotte was a truly kind child. Catherine smiled, a real unshielded smile. Her daughter was growing up grounded and thoughtful, the greatest victory of all. As Catherine walked back to her car that morning, the London sun felt warmer than it had a week prior. She had faced a public insult and responded with a private act of grace. She had proven that the strength of the crown does not lie in its ability to punish, but in its capacity to understand. Royalty is a performance, yes, but on this day, the truth was even better. The golden girl of the palace had shown the world that you can be the future queen and still be the kind of mother who fixes a shirt, stands up to a bully, and offers a hand to someone who is falling. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had finally abided in her own power. Looking back on this viral moment, it is clear that Catherine's grace was not an accident. It was a choice made through years of discipline. She understands that every interaction is an opportunity to build or destroy trust. By choosing to help the teacher who shamed her daughter, she redefined what it means to be a modern royal. She isn't just a face on a coin. She is a woman who understands the psychological depths of the human experience. She showed us that when life gives you a storm, you don't just survive it. You use it to clear the air for everyone else. What do you think of Princess Catherine's decision to help the teacher who humiliated her child? Was it an act of extreme grace, or should she have demanded a harsher punishment for the sake of setting a standard? Share your thoughts on the resilience of the princess and her daughter in the comments below. We value every perspective as we explore the real hearts behind the gold of the royal family. If you enjoyed this deep dive into a morning that changed the palace, hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of courage and character. We will see you in the next one as we continue to uncover the hidden frequencies of the legends who shape our world. Catherine is still walking, still leading, and still proving that kindness is the ultimate royal command.